Ever catch yourself listening to English, like in a movie, or just someone talking, and it kind of feels like all the words are just kind of like running together?
Yeah.
It's like this big blur. It's like hard to understand.
Yeah, that's super common. And if that's something you've ever dealt with, like it can make you feel like you're missing out on stuff.
Totally.
You're like, your understanding isn't as good as you want it to be.
Right. Like you might even start to think, is my English just not good enough?
Uh-huh.
But here's a really important thing to remember right off the bat. The reason English can sound so fast isn't always about like the actual speed.
Right.
It's more about the way native speakers connect words together.
Right.
You know, the way we sort of shorten sounds
Yeah.
and just like the natural flow of how we talk.
That is such a good point. It's not that English is like spoken at some super speed compared to other languages.
Right.
It's more about like the way the words connect and work together to create that feeling of speed.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to dive into today in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're really going to try to figure out why fast English can be so hard to process.
Uh-huh.
We'll look closely at how native speakers actually talk. And then the really important part, we're going to give you some real strategies that you can use to improve your listening.
I love it.
By the time we're done, you should have a way better understanding of what's going on and feel way more confident and ready to handle faster English out in the real world.
Yeah, you got this.
Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's just jump right into the big question that's probably on everyone's mind. Why does English sound so fast?
Well, as you mentioned, it can feel like native speakers have this incredible speaking speed.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's more about like the specific things about how spoken English works.
Uh-huh.
It really comes down to how we connect words and where we put the emphasis in a sentence.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. You mentioned connecting words. What's that like for someone listening? How does that work?
So this is something linguists call connected speech. So think of it this way. Instead of saying each word in a sentence, like it's in its own little box with spaces around it,
Right.
native speakers kind of slide the words into each other.
Yeah.
It makes things smoother, but if you're waiting for those pauses between each word,
Yeah.
it can really throw you off.
It can.
It's all about the rhythm, you know?
Yeah. Can you give us an example of how this connecting sounds?
Totally. So take a simple question like, what are you doing? Now, if you're learning, you might be expecting to hear each of those four words, like, what are you doing?
Right, with the pauses.
With the pauses. But a native speaker would usually say something more like, what you doing?
Right.
So you hear how what are becomes like whatcha.
Yeah.
And you and doing also kind of get closer together.
They do. It's like some of the sounds are holding hands.
Yeah.
And becoming one sound. You've got another example.
Absolutely. So think about the question, did you eat? Again, you might be expecting to hear did you eat with little pauses, but most times it'll sound like did you eat? That did and you, they just merge together.
They do. And it's interesting because if you're listening for that did and then the you and you hear did ya, it's like you missed a whole word.
Exactly.
So connected speech, that's a big part of this.
Yeah.
What else makes it sound so fast?
The second big thing is word reductions.
Yeah.
So in casual talk, native speakers, we just shorten words and phrases all the time. It's
Right.
like our language wants to be efficient.
Yeah.
You know, get the message across quickly.
Makes sense.
So for example, you'll often hear going to become gonna, like I'm gonna call you later. Or want to becomes wanna, like do you want to go to the park?
Mhm.
And a super common one is got to, turning into gotta, like I gotta leave now.
Yeah, and those are all so common that, you know, we hear them all the time, but it's helpful to think of them like they're shortened versions of those longer phrases.
Right.
It's like, oh, I did hear all the words. They were just kind of like shrunk down.
Exactly. And we can't forget about contractions.
Right.
Things like I am becoming or he will turning into he'll. These are also ways we make words shorter.
Right.
And it can make things feel faster if you're not used to it.
Okay, so we've got words linking together. We've got words getting shortened up. What's the third big reason why English can sound so fast to a learner?
So the last big piece of this puzzle is unstressed words.
Okay.
In English, we don't say every word in a sentence with the same emphasis.
Yeah.
Some words are stressed, meaning we say them clearly, maybe a little louder with more oomph,
Right.
while other words are unstressed and they become weaker, quieter, almost like they're hiding.
Right.
It's part of the natural rhythm of English.
Gotcha. Can you give us an example with a sentence?
Sure. Think about, I went to the store. If we said every word with the same emphasis, it'd sound like a robot talking.
Yeah.
In natural English, the words that carry the main meaning like went and store are usually stressed. The smaller words like to and the, they're unstressed.
Right.
So a native speaker might actually say something like, I went to the store. To and the become really quick, almost like one soft sound.
Like they get swept away by those more important words.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to recap for everyone listening, it's not that native speakers are talking super fast. It's more about these three things. How words connect together, how they get shortened in casual speech, and how some words become less important in a sentence.
You got it.
And it's important to understand that if you're finding fast English difficult, it doesn't mean your English is bad. It's often because of this difference between careful pronunciation, like you might hear in a classroom, and the more natural way we talk in everyday life.
Makes sense.
Okay, so now we know why English can sound so fast.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the what.
Okay.
What are the specific things about fast English that we as listeners need to be aware of?
Great question. So now that we get the reasons behind it,
Right.
we can focus on the actual things you'll hear a lot when you listen to natural English.
Okay.
And as we said, these mostly fit into those three categories. Linking sounds between words, different types of word reductions, and then some sounds actually disappearing completely.
Okay, let's start with linking sounds.
Sounds good.
We talked about a couple examples, but can you give us some more common ways that words tend to connect? Like, what should our ears be listening for?
Sure. Think about an instruction like turn it off. Now, if you said each word separately, there'd be a clear consonant sound at the end of turn and a vowel starting it.
Yeah.
But when people talk naturally, the consonant at the end of turn often links straight to the vowel in it. So it sounds more like turn it off,
Right.
like there's no pause.
Almost like the words are glued together.
Totally. And here's another one. I need a nap. If you listen closely when native speakers say this, you'll often hear it like, I need a nap, or even I need nap,
Okay, yeah.
where the D at the end of need blends into the A sound.
And that's subtle. But if that's happening all over the place, it would definitely make it harder to pick out the individual words.
For sure. Now let's go back to word reductions. We gave some good examples before, like gonna and wanna. But are there any others that often trip people up?
Yeah, definitely. So I am going to very often turns into I'm gonna. So that's like a contraction and a reduction.
Right.
Another one is do you want to? Often sounds like do you wanna?
Yeah.
Again, shorting do you?
Yeah.
And then want to wanna. And then there's what are you doing? Which becomes what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's like these common phrases, they've got their own special code that
Yeah.
native speakers use without thinking.
That's a great way to put it. And while it makes things easier for us as native speakers,
Right.
it can be really tricky for learners who are expecting to hear all the words.
Totally. And the third thing you mentioned was dropped sounds.
Yes.
And this one sounds especially hard because it's not just about things being faster or shorter. It's like sounds just vanish.
Right.
What kinds of sounds tend to get dropped in fast English?
Well, this can definitely make you feel like you're missing parts of what someone is saying. A good example is the word internet. It's spelled with a T in the middle, but in casual fast talk, it's often internet.
Right.
That middle T sound is either super soft or gone.
Like a whole different word.
Yeah. And another very common one is I don't know. In faster speech, you'll hear it as I don't know.
Right.
Dropping the T and don't.
Oh, yeah.
You get the meaning from the context, but if you're listening for every consonant, it can be confusing.
Right. So it's not just about how fast the sounds are said. It's these tiny but important changes and even sounds disappearing.
Exactly.
They can make it seem like you're missing words or the speaker's going super fast.
It all adds up.
Yeah. So when you think about why you might understand English perfectly in a textbook or when someone is speaking carefully, but then you have trouble with real conversations or movies.
Right.
The answer is often in these three things.
Yeah.
The linking of sounds, the shortening of words and phrases,
Yeah.
and the fact that some sounds just get dropped.
You nailed it.
Okay, this has been super helpful to understand why English sounds fast and what makes it sound that way.
Glad to hear it.
Now for the part I know everyone wants to know. What can we actually do about it?
Okay.
What are some real strategies to help us understand fast English better in the real world?
Of course, understanding fast English is totally possible, but it takes the right approach and practice. Here are 5 key strategies you can start using today.
All right, let's hear them. What's the first one?
The first one is to train your ears with both slow and fast speech.
Oh.
The idea is to slowly get your ears used to it.
Gotcha.
You start by listening to English that's spoken slowly and clearly. There's lots of resources for English learners that use this kind of speech.
Right.
And then as you get better at understanding slower speech, you start listening to faster, more natural, native English.
Right.
This gradual change helps your brain get used to the rhythm, the connected sounds, and the reductions without feeling overwhelmed.
Makes sense. It's like any kind of training.
Yeah.
You don't start with the heaviest weight.
Right.
Work your way up. What's strategy number 2?
So the second strategy is to listen and read at the same time.
Yeah.
This is a really powerful technique because it uses both your hearing and your vision. When you listen to English and follow along with the text, whether it's subtitles or a transcript,
Right.
your brain starts connecting the sounds you hear with the written words.
Gotcha.
And this can be really helpful for figuring out those linked sounds, recognizing shortened words and phrases, and understanding why some sounds seem to disappear.
So, for example, if you're watching a TV show, turning on the English subtitles could be a good way to practice.
Exactly. Or if you're listening to a podcast, try to find one with a transcript.
Right.
The key is to actually pay attention to how the spoken words match up with the writing.
Yeah, actively following along. That's a really practical tip. What's number 3?
Number 3 is a technique called shadowing.
Okay.
This means you listen to a short sentence or phrase and then immediately repeat it, trying to copy the speaker's pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm as closely as you can.
Like an echo.
Exactly like an echo, and this helps you internalize the natural flow of faster speech
Hi.
and become more aware of those sound changes and connections.
Yeah.
It's like building muscle memory for your pronunciation and your listening.
Interesting.
Start with just a few words at a time and then make the phrases longer as you get better. Might feel weird at first, but it's a great way to improve both your listening and speaking.
That sounds really good. What's strategy number 4?
Okay, strategy number 4 is to focus on the keywords in a sentence, not every single word.
Okay.
When you're listening to fast English, it can be overwhelming if you try to understand every little thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead, try to pick out the keywords, usually the nouns, verbs, and adjectives that carry the main meaning.
Okay.
Even if you miss some of the smaller, less important words, you can still get the main idea.
Right. It takes the pressure off of having to understand every single word.
Exactly. Train yourself to find the important information and let go of the frustration of missing a little word here and there.
Love it.
Context will often help you fill in the gaps.
Awesome. And lastly, what's the 5th key strategy?
All right. The 5th one, and this is super important, is to listen to English every single day.
Okay.
Even if it's just for a short time, like 5 minutes. Being consistent is really important when it comes to learning a language and getting better at listening.
Right.
Even short but regular practice makes a huge difference over time.
Makes sense.
It helps your ears get used to the sounds, the rhythm, and the little details of the language.
Yeah.
It's like a little workout for your ears every day.
Gotcha.
Find something you like to listen to, whether it's podcasts, music, news, or videos, and make it part of your daily routine.
Right.
The more you listen to English, even for short periods, the easier it will be to understand fast speech.
So it's not about doing hours and hours of study.
Nope.
Even a little bit each day can help. These are all great strategies. It's good to know there are things we can do to get better at understanding fast English.
Definitely. And remember, it takes time, patience, and effort.
Right.
Don't get discouraged if you don't see big changes right away. Just keep practicing these strategies, and you'll slowly find it easier to understand spoken English.
So for you listening, here's a challenge. Pick one of these 5 strategies that you like the most and try to use it every day, even for a few minutes.
Yes.
See what kind of progress you make.
And pay attention to how your listening improves as you use these techniques.
Yeah.
Remember, every little bit of practice helps.
So to recap today, we talked about why English can sound so fast to learners. We looked at connected speech,
Right.
different types of word reductions, and the role of unstressed words in the rhythm of the language.
Yes.
Then we talked about the key features of faster speech, including linking sounds, common word reductions, and those dropped sounds. And finally, we gave you 5 practical strategies to help you understand it better.
We did.
Training with slower and faster speech, listening and reading at the same time, shadowing, focusing on keywords, and being consistent with daily listening practice.
You got it.
The main message here is that it's not about the speed of the language.
Right.
It's about the patterns that native speakers use when they talk. By understanding these patterns and using these strategies, you could feel more confident and understand spoken English better.
Exactly.
And one last thing to think about.
Okay.
Start paying closer attention to how native English speakers around you, whether it's in the movies, TV shows, videos, or even real conversations.
Right.
How do they actually pronounce everyday phrases?
Yeah.
Really listen for those places where words link together those words that get shortened and those sounds that seem to disappear. Doing that and using the strategies we talked about today can really help you improve your listening skills and make fast English less scary and easier to understand.
It's all about becoming a more aware listener.
Yeah, really noticing the details of natural spoken English.
Absolutely.
Well said. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found this helpful and feel more ready to take on fast English.
Go get 'em.
Now go out there and start listening.
Happy listening, everyone.
We'll catch you in the next deep dive. See